everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sayla and today I am going to be talking about some of my favorite cozy winter reading recommendations. So every time the Christmas season comes around or the holiday season comes around and it starts to get a little bit cozier in your house or colder outside, I tend to reach for two specific genres of books. I love to read fantasy in the wintertime. Something about escaping the frigid cold of Chicago always sounds amazing, and getting lost in kind of that, I don't know, a different story that couldn't take place in our world is always appealing to me. And also historical fiction, just another kind of way to transport yourself back in time, appeals to me in the winter months when you are stuck inside and you feel like you haven't seen the sun in days, and you can at least have a cozy little, I don't know, book to read. So a lot of these things on this list, actually most of these things on this list, are going to be fantasy and historical fiction related, just because that's what I love to read in the winter time. But I also do think that all of these books on this list are just cozy in general, and you'll really like them if you feel like you, I don't know, just want something heartwarming to read, especially during the holiday season when family relations can be pretty difficult for a lot of different people. So let's get started. The first book I want to recommend that I love to read around the holidays, and that I'm sure a ton of people love to read, is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. If you haven't read this, it's an awesome Christmas story. It just makes you feel very appreciative for the things you have coming into the holidays, even if it's not much. And ever since I was a little kid, I've loved reading this every Christmas. It's just, I don't know, it's the most heartwarming book in the world. And my copy in particular has these little cool illustrations in it that are really nice to look at as you go through, and I'm sure there's quite a few editions of Little Women that have this. I got this in a used bookstore, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's a great one. It's a great book to read if you have sisters, just because it's a lot about the relationship between the four sisters who are the Little Women, how they fight but also take care of each other, and it's just great in that respect. The second book series that I have here is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This is a relatively new book series. I'm loaning out the first one, which is why I don't have it here, but the second one is called The Mime Order, and the third one is called The Song Rising. I believe it's going to be 6 books in total, but it's a story you can sit down and you can read in one sitting, and just you can't put the book down, and you just get completely transported into this world. It takes place in London, but almost like a dystopian London mixed with some paranormal elements. It's unlike anything I've ever read before. It has a lot of really awesome characters that aren't the greatest people in the world, but that you still love and respect for their faults, which is cool. You don't get to read a lot of stories where you're rooting for characters that aren't perfect. So I do highly recommend these books. Like I said, the first one is called The Bone Season, and that would be the first one to pick up. You definitely have to read them in order to understand what's going on. And the first one sets the whole foundation for the series, so it is important to read. If you like paranormal fiction, if you like fantasy, if you like dystopian, you'll probably love this series. The next series I have here, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of because it has a TV show, these are so heavy, oh my god, is the Outlander series. They weigh 1 billion pounds. These are 4 of the books in the series. I don't have them all because I am only on the 5th book. Again, I'm loaning out my copy of the first one, which is why I don't have it here. But I'm on the 5th book right now, which is The Fiery Cross. Basically, the first one starts off in the 1940s. It follows the story of a woman named Claire Randall who gets thrown back in time through these standing stones to what century in Scotland? Maybe the 17th century? 18th century Scotland, and she's kind of thrown completely out of her element, obviously, but it's a little bit of a love story. It's a little bit of historical fiction, but the reason I love these books is because you're just completely transported to another time, and each one kind of takes place in a different place in different time than the first one. So the one that I just read, they travel to America in this one. This one they travel to the Caribbean, and they're all kind of snapshots of different points in time, which is really, really interesting, and you get to learn a lot. Obviously it's historical fiction, so not everything in them is completely true, but it's pretty easy to separate the fact from the fiction in here. And I know Diana Gabaldon, who wrote the series, I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, I believe she was a biologist before she sat down to write this series, so she has some science background to it, which you can kind of see reflected in the main character, who's a doctor in her own time, but ends up becoming kind of like an herbal doctor, like in Scotland, 18th century Scotland. So super interesting like shift between that too. But yeah, I'd highly recommend them. They are all about 1,000 pages long, but totally worth it, especially if you take your time reading them. I've been reading these for years now, and I kind of take a break in between each one, but I can't wait to start this next one this winter. So yeah, great books. The next book I have here is a relatively recent release. It's called Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Laini Taylor wrote, it's right here, the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, which if you haven't read this is also a really awesome series. She's an amazing writer. She's really, really talented and has just a way with words that's completely beautiful and kind of sets her work in places that you don't normally see fantasy things set in, so it's really cool. This was one of the most original pieces of like YA fantasy I have probably ever read. I've never read a story like this. It follows two different people. One of them is a boy named Strange, who is a little bit of a recluse. He like lives in a library basically, but in a fantastical world. And then the other person or thing that this follows is the story, I guess the other main character in the story is a blue-skinned goddess who's locked inside of this tower. It's about magic, but it's also about the journey of how they come to meet, and the world building in this is absolutely unbelievable. I've never read anything like it. Like I said, the book is also really beautiful itself. It has like a little moth on here, and I know the UK edition is even prettier, so definitely worth a read. Definitely a story you can get deeply involved in, especially in the winter months. I think that Laini Taylor is one of the most talented writers ever. Like, I love her, and I think her work doesn't get enough credit for being incredible. So yeah, it's a quick read because it's YA, but it spans age groups. It's awesome. Yeah. The next few books I have here are all books that aren't part of a series, but they are by the same author, and I have read all of her work. I think her work is some of the coziest writing that I've ever read, and that is all these different books by Sarah Addison Allen. I have The Peach Keeper here, The Girl Who Chased the Moon, Lost Lake, and First Frost. She is one of these authors that creates these little tiny towns with, I don't know, these characters that you feel like you could be best friends with or something. I don't see hardly any of her on BookTube at all, and I think she's an author that a lot of more people should know about. The writing it's just fun. It's like, one time somebody I know described this type of book as a Snickers bar for your brain. It's literally just like candy, and you can eat it up and you don't feel particularly, smarter afterwards, but you feel like you've gotten deeply involved in this super cozy story, and these people in this town have just become a part of your life through the story, and it's unbelievable. I feel she does use a bit of magical realism in all of these books, so there's these little magical things that happen here and there, but it's just heartwarming. All of these are so heartwarming, and I really recommend them, especially if you're in the middle of a reading slump or anything like that, because they're really short and quick reads. They're not very long at all. I think this one is, about 300 pages, but they have pretty big type. So they go by really fast. You can read them in one sitting, you can read them in a day, and it's great. It's great if you feel like your brain's not working and you just want a break, or you're really tired from work and you want to come home and just like pick something up but not have to think too hard. These are awesome books. I've read all of them. I can't wait. There's a couple more than these. There's another book called Garden Spells and one called The Sugar Queen, which I love that one. Alright, so I have 2 more books here to share with you today. The first one is The Shoemaker's Wife by Adriana Trajani. It's another kind of historical fiction read. I forget where it takes place because I read it a while ago. Oh, World War I in America, but it's an Italian family living in New York at that time, I believe. Between New York and Minnesota, I want to say. Yeah, New York's Little Italy. It's one of those books, again, that you can read that's super heartwarming, but there's a lot of good food mixed in it. I think I like to read books that like describe cooking and like cool cooking scenes really well, because I was like starving after this book for pasta. First of all, she describes all these Italian traditions of like making pasta and the food they make, but it's also a kind of a love story, a little bit about New York during World War I, especially for Italian immigrants, and it's fascinating, but also you just feel cozy. You feel like you want to go home and like cook a good meal after you read it, or spend time with the people you love, which is kind of what the holiday season is about, in my opinion. So yeah, definitely pick this one up in particular. She has a ton of books, and they're all that great, but this one is the best in my opinion. It's called The Shoemaker's Wife, and again, that's by Adriana Trajani. And then the last kind of series that I have here, which again, I'm missing the first one because I loaned it out. I've loaned out a ton of my first ones. But it's the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book, called The Well of Ascension. The Mistborn trilogy is incredible. You just get completely transported into the lives of these characters, and the magic system inside the book is really cool. The main character eats like pieces of metal and produces magic by ingesting different types of metals. So it's super fascinating. You have never read anything like it, I guarantee, but also the characters are awesome. I found myself laughing out loud at different times at things that they would say, but also being like super worried for them. Also, you know, just you get completely transported into another place and another time. You can just read the first one. I mean, the first book can stand alone as its own, but in my opinion, the second book is even better than the first one, which doesn't tend to happen for me in series at all. Like, I tend to feel like the second book is a slump or something, but in this case, I feel like Brandon Sanderson like made the second book just as good, if not better, than the first one. It's a great series, especially for the winter. If you want to get really involved in one series, it's a good way to go. So those are all my winter reading recommendations. If you have any winter reading recommendations of your own, please leave them in the comments below, because I've already read all of these, but I'm also looking for winter reading recommendations of my own to get me through the long winter in Chicago, which is super long. Let me know what you're currently reading too. I'm always interested in hearing that. But if you like this video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe. I will leave some links to all these books in the description box below. Okay, bye!